What's up, everybody? How you guys doing? Welcome to another Heroes of the Storm video here on KhaldorTV. We have a game on Tomb of the Spider Queen, and this is actually a match from the ZOTAC Cup, and we have Virtus Pro going up against, in this case, Alternate Fancy. So the game that we're seeing here is actually pretty damn cool, because once again we have that strategy that Fancy was drafting during the end of the Storm, where they're relying on Zagara and Sylvanas. And if you've been watching the videos, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. They try to push early on in the game, get themselves a lead around level 10 when the heroic ability comes into play, and snowball it from there. It worked extremely well during the end of the Storm, and a lot of the teams have been starting to really counterban, taking Sylvanas or Zagara away from them. But in this case, Virtus Pro is actually trying a completely different approach. They are saying like, well, you can play that, we don't mind, but we are going to play a sniper composition against you. We're going to use, in this case now, Tyrande. We're going to throw in a Kel'Thas with a Gravity Lapse. We also have a Malfurion with the Roots, and we are going into just a couple of frontline warriors that also have stuns and damage that we can from the beginning put your heroes under pressure. So they go the complete different approach to like, well, screw pushing, we are actually going to try and kill shit. And that's exactly what they're going to try and do right now. It's a best of one that we are seeing, and well, let's jump right into the game and find out which team can advance in the ZOTAC tournament and which team will be dropped out. Welcome everybody to the first game of the day here. We are in the ZOTAC Cup, and we have actually a very cool setup here right now. At this point, as you can see, it's Virtus Pro going up against Alternate Fancy. Fancy in this case to the left side now at this point with Nurok on Arthurs, Gerd Amherd on Uther. We have Crosby on Sylvanas, Dartmok on Zagara, and Blumby playing Mirrodin in this case. To the right side of the map currently, we have Virtus Pro, the Russians here with BKB on Johanna, Unstable on Malfurion, Andilendi on Kel'Thas, Sefkaja on Tyrande, and we have Kuni-chan playing Tyrael in this case. So there's a lot of things that we have to talk about, especially after the matches that we've seen at End of the Storm. There's a couple of things that I really want to highlight. First of all, let's talk real quickly about the build that we're seeing for Sefkaja on Tyrande. We've been talking quite a bit about that I personally don't really love to see a Tyrande with a double warrior setup if she doesn't go for a damage build. Na'Vi has been playing that style quite a bit, and for them it really works, but they mostly use her on this map since they're trying to snowball in the early game with good kills against the opponent. What we're seeing right now, with a big fight already in the mid lane by the way, and wow, Crosby under a lot of pressure on the Sylvanas. Oh my god, just barely getting away there. But yeah, what we're seeing right now is exactly what I mentioned when we've been talking about the subject. We have now a build that allows Tyrande in the late game to also do a lot of damage. So what Na'Vi is trying to do is they're trying to dominate the early game. They don't go into Season Marksman build on Tyrande with Searing Arrows on level 4, but go more for Sniper build. They try to establish an early lead in the early game, and then from level 10 onwards just snowball the objective and take it from there. So that's the idea that Na'Vi has. Virtus Pro plays it a bit different, whereas Na'Vi has a disadvantage in the late game if they don't get their early game kills. Virtus Pro is relying heavily still on the damage that Tyrande has. It's not like she can really get on the level of Arena, but if she goes for the auto attack build, she can still do some damage and some work in the later stages of the game, and is not only cannon fodder back then. When we're looking at the setup that we're seeing here for Fancy on the other hand, then it's basically the same idea. They also want on this map get to level 10 faster, reach that early on and try to just snowball the objectives and then control the middle of the map and turn in over and over again and just like get the objectives to do most of the work for them. And the idea that they are approaching here is to not go for snipes against heroes, but instead to go for structure attack. So they use Sylvanas together with a Zagara, two great heroes that are amazing for pushing power. And you can really tell with how the game right now flows that they are willing to give up quite a few of these lanes in the early game. Every single time a rotation from Virtus Pro starts to come over, they move back and they yield because they know that there is just too much lockdown in CC with Gravity Lapse and all those stuns that are now being dropped. Gerd is trying to escape, but he gets body blocked and gets eliminated. The first kill here, as expected, for Virtus Pro. They're going for that aggressive composition, and this time Fancy just rotated away a bit too early. But the idea for them is really just to always yield when there's a rotation coming their way, moving back, using the lane that is not being attacked by Virtus Pro to just simply push with their heroes and try to get that experience lead. So it's pretty awesome actually to see these two builds going up against each other, well, team compositions, because both of them are more or less designed to achieve the same thing, but they use different paths to achieve it. And Taronda, already the weakest link in the setup, and she gets taken out. A nice kill here for Fancy. Team Fancy with a very, very solid job there. And as expected on level 4, now the Searing Arrows for Taronda, and here the Seasoned Marksman on level 1. It's a build that really works out quite well on this map in particular, because it's so easy to just stack on more than one lane. You can just use that rotation early on to get those additional stacks, and that's exactly what Team Virtus Pro is using here. And they're one of the few teams that actually commit to a build where Taronda uses this particular talent tree. When we're looking at the rest of the talents though, it's more or less what you would expect here. With Tyrael, one of the main tanks now in the setup for Virtus Pro, they are using him with not only Regeneration Master, but also with Amplified Healing. These two talents, by the way, they synergize. So you get a lot more of heals out of there once that you pick up Amplified Healing. And the snipe against Khaldor. Now that's something that shouldn't really happen to Virtus Pro. They should be the ones to dominate the early game fights thanks to the lockdowns that they have. They have a lot of CCs with not only Malfurion in his roots, but also the stuns on heroes like Taronda. We have Gravity Lapse and also Johanna in the mix as well. So they need to make sure that they are getting a bit more damage onto the side of Fancy. But Fancy right now is actually really starting to take a bit of a lead in experience, and that's exactly what they've been trying to do the entire time. As mentioned before, they are using or going to use the Web Weavers together with that amazing pushing power thanks to Sylvana Zagara to just like drop the opponent low in experience compared to themselves, hit level 10 faster, and then from there on really just snowball the game. And that's exactly what they're doing here now, especially with Unstable Poison picked up by Sylvana. So at level 1 went of course for Lost Soul. It's talent that synergizes really well with the level 16 talent. So you reduce the cooldown, you can just like spam out the Shadow Dagger here, and then later on you will also be able to just use the Cold Embrace to drop targets. But for now it's really all about the pressure, and they are using that already at the bot lane. And thanks to the arrow trade that we are seeing here, Sylvanas is doing a whole lot of work. It's 4 heroes, 5 heroes, 5 versus 5, and both of them on the same talents right now. Level 7 talent coming into play on the side of Team Virtus Pro, but they lose Andy Landy on Khaldor. BKB is rushing away. Taronda dead now too, and Tyrael is also dying. A great position here for Alternate Fancy. As expected, they are starting to push these structures in. Up at the top lane, the Web Weaver is still doing its thing, and as I already speculated during the draft, this is the setup that they really were aiming for. That last pick on Sylvanas is something that surprised several teams already during the end of the storm, where they've been using it, and apparently Virtus Pro has not really seen that happen just yet. So they are starting to fall behind, and as already mentioned before, once that you have a composition like the one that Fancy is using here, you have a very nice chance to actually like get Web Weaver after Web Weaver wave and push that in with level 10 then. And that's the entire idea behind this. Tomb of the Spider Queen is a very snowbally map, and this is one of the things that they are trying to exploit here. The trick against something like this is to really stay on the same level of you as your opponent until level 10, and that can mean against a Taronda composition to play safer, to play a little bit more passive, and against the composition that is being used on the side of Alternate Fancy, you usually have to make sure that you have some lane push on your own, which they kind of do. I mean, Tyrael, Johanna are not too bad. It's not the like Tyrael, for example, is not the most amazing hero when it comes to like lane push, but he's still pretty decent. He has Smite and a few other talents that he can use here, but for them it's more an idea. Oh, a bit of a blunder there. I like the thought, but that didn't work out, but they still get the kills. So Syndragosa plus more, not really ideal, but still they get their kills here, and that's of course another big, well, this is basically like the perfect example of why you should never fight level 10 versus level 9. Because, well, you do not have your heroic ability, and then you are going to get slaughtered. And that's exactly what currently happens to Virtus Pro here. Syndragosa, more Wailing Arrow, Divine Shield, and Avatar picked up. And now this is the pushing presence that we've been talking about earlier. They are 2 levels ahead, and that allows them to just like go full ham now with Zagara and Sylvanas, which is the key to the composition that Fancy is playing here. So they are starting to push in the walls at the keep, and you can really tell that up at the top lane, the Web Weaver just now was taken out. Unstable is doing whatever he can to keep the last fort alive, but the bot lane is now pressured too, and over here in the mid lane it looks like it's also going to be the fall of the second tower, and that's indeed the case. So that's a lot of experience that Fancy can pick up now, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're using the Web Weaver with the bot lane that still survived to even push in more, with Malfurion desperately trying to get some experience for his team up at the top lane, which for now at least does not really work out the way that he wanted to, but he's doing this as well as he possibly can. So right now, a pretty solid game here on the side of Alternate Fancy. It looks a bit like a slaughter, but this is basically just what I've been going on about since the draft. It's really just this composition that they've been trying to draft, and now that there's no level 10, they exploit this as much as they can. And this is like really the key. They get the keep already 8 minutes in, and this is something that they really have to do. That's really important to realize right now. They need to push the advantage early on to get exactly that, a kill on the keep, which is what they just achieved. If they don't do that, and they will end up on even talents at some point, they might actually fall behind again. But right now they play the perfect game here. They lose Nurok, but it's all good. That's a kill, of course, in favor of Team Virtus.pro right now, who have finally now Sanctification, the Blessed Shield, and level 10 Tranquility, Phoenix, and also Starfall. But still, it's a really tricky position to be in for the team. So they have to be a bit careful here. BKB is trying to turn in. 63 gems is what they have, and they need to just like snowball that back again. The problem is that they're up against level 13 now, and with that we're seeing Relentless, Shrink Ray on Uther, which is going to help especially with the control against a hero like Tyrael. There's also Mutalisk, another Thunderclap talent taken, and nice stun combo against Gerd, and that's exactly what Virtus.pro was aiming for the entire time. These snipe kills. They didn't really get too many of those just yet, but at least every single kill that they get now bring them a bit closer in experience. And with a 5 versus 4, they have actually a solid chance of finally turning in a few of those gems. And if they get the complete turn in, then they have the Web Weavers too. Again the snipe, and Crosby's low. The healer is dead, and the Owl nearly taking Crosby down, but not even with that last second vision bomb were they able to eliminate him. But for now, they have a very cool setup here up at the top, and they might be able to make something happen. Nah, doesn't look like it. Even could BKB with another attempted stun, but they couldn't turn in. And that's the most important part, that there was no turn-in for them. Now, of course, one of the things that we still have to look at is also how many stacks Tyrande has now. And she's at 18. That's not really amazing 10 minutes into the game. If you compare that to, for example, what Reyna is expected to have at this point in time, then it's quite low. But it's still another indicator that later on in the game, Virtus.pro will have a chance to fight back here. So currently, the push up at the top lane is exactly what Alternate Fancy needs to do now. It's really smart, actually, to see how they are rotating on the map and how they are currently playing this. They are an amazingly strong team, and it's really a pleasure to watch them. They are very similar to what we've seen happen with Bob. I mean, Bob consists of a lot of players that originally played for SK Gaming, and then they left the team and kind of founded a new team. And they were pretty good already before, but when they were with SK, things didn't really work out too well for them. Then they had a bit of a lineup change, and all of a sudden things just clicked, and they started to play just so good. And it's very similar with Fancy. Fancy was always aggressive. Fancy was always a contender in the top 10, but ever since they had Nurok and Gerd join them, they are now absolutely amazing. And at least for now, that still persists. Questions, of course, how long can they really keep that up? But so far, they're doing a pretty cool job here. Level 13 incoming soon for Virtus.pro, though, and they're already pushing in. They have the Web Weavers finally. It's the first Web Weaver set for them, and they are trying to close that gap in experience. The loss of the keep at the bot lane really, of course, was a big blow to Virtus.pro, but still, they are trying to get at least something out of this now, and the towers at the top lane would be a good start. Rest of the team already moving down to the bot lane. Sylvanas is pretty much alone, but she is amazing when it comes to lane push, and she can take down the Web Weaver, no problem whatsoever. There's an attempt to go for Nurok, and they get the stun, but the Divine Shield is helping him out now. BKB could use Condemn again. Didn't. More already used, and Syndragosa. The more only capturing Sefkaja, who already utilized his own Starfall. Tranquility keeping them alive. Now Blumby rushing away again. But yep, there comes the Phoenix out for them to just zone a bit better. And they can turn in once more. They have 44 gems. That's not enough to get a Web Weaver, but that's definitely enough to at least for now secure themselves a pretty solid amount of gems and make sure that they're not going to lose them in case they die. Zagara then again has also a few other purposes on the map here, and we see that once more with all those creep tumors that Darkmook has been placing down. So they have very good vision about the turn-in spots. Level 13 now gave not only an ice block on Malfurion, but we have in this case also the Huntress Fury on level 13 for the additional attack speed, which is actually really nice. As you can tell, we have at the same time now also imposing Will Taken, which is actually like a pretty cool talent when we're talking about like the auto attack heroes that we're seeing on the side of the opponent. There's also now finally the Chain Bomb in play, and that is when Virtus Pro is going to hit a pretty huge spike in power. Level 16 then again will be ready for Alternate Fancy in just a few seconds, and that's of course exactly what they've been hoping for, that they will have that talent lead for even longer. But still, even with Cold Embrace, Benediction, Stone Skin, and also Stone Form plus Brute Expansion, all of those amazing talents of course, especially when we're talking about Zagara's damage. She's going to get a huge boost thanks to that double Hunter Killer right now, and let's not even talk about Uther with a boost that he has in healing powers. But all of that what we're seeing right now still is starting to become a game where we could see a few more kills incoming for Alternate Fancy soon. There was the Wailing Arrow already being used here. They're jumping in again. Blumby is in position, and they're starting to move away here. Couldn't really secure the kill, and well, Malfurion was attempting to go for the root, but that didn't really work out for him just yet. So currently everybody rotating down again. We have BKB in position to just like de-push the bot lane. There's a few siege giants that Zagara has been able to pull down early on. And in the mid lane, oh, they kill against Kel'Thas. And that's of course now a problem. He really has to position himself well enough so that they can't jump on him. That's the biggest problem that they have right now. And Syndragosa to disable the keep, and that's a good chance now finally for Fancy to move in and maybe take that down. They have a good hard cap, and Tyrande is down too. Both of the damage dealers are eliminated, and that is a pretty annoying situation now. 5 versus 3 with no damage dealer to push them back and try to use their poking abilities. So again they keep falling. That's of course the second one. 17 versus 15. Virtus Pro, after the loss of the first keep, has actually done a pretty solid job when it came to closing the gap in experience, but now they're still 2 levels behind, and those few losses that they just suffered during the last 2 minutes, they were pretty brutal. If they would have lost one of their tanks, Tyrell for example, I think they could have maybe even prevented the loss of the keep, just because they had both, they would have had both damage dealers and could have moved in again to push that back a bit. But as it happens right now, they find themselves in a very awkward spot. I mean, looking again at the auto attack damage, we have by now 27 stacks for Seasoned Marksman on the side of Tyrande, so that is starting to do a bit more damage. As we can see here, Tyrande currently looking at 24,000, which is pretty solid actually. Nurok dying in this case, and yeah, Fancy hasn't won that game just yet. They took 2 of the keeps down, which is extremely important, but we have very solid damage on a lot of the heroes that we're seeing for Virtus Pro, and the late game is going to be pretty good for them, especially since they are the ones with a lot of talents that cater directly towards the late game. Zagara dying now again, and that is a very solid move. We have on the side of Tyrande now True Shot Aura taken, and wow, going straight for the boss here. So yeah, that should be visible pretty much, or that should actually be something that Alternate or that Fancy anticipates here. But let's see if they can do something about it. Blessed Hammer now taken, and yeah, things are starting to get a little bit worrisome for Fancy. They at this point have the Web Weavers coming again. Blue Web Weavers on the way. Holy Ground, by the way, taken. But that boss is going to help to just occupy Fancy for a bit longer. And with 10 kills against 6, it's not really like they're out of the game just yet. Virtus Pro, that is. But they have, of course, to play a very passive game when those Web Weavers come in and have to defend. They can't push with the boss at the same time. The reason is quite simple. There's just no way for them to keep the core alive if all of this happens. So up at the top lane, a very similar situation now for Fancy, rushing over, making sure that they take down the boss first, and Virtus Pro taking down both of the Web Weavers on the remaining lanes. They still haven't dropped those forts, by the way, but now that the death timers are so long, if they get good kills and then also like one turn in, that's basically all that they need to do to make sure that they have a very good shot at taking down a few structures and start to try, at least try and snowball it from there on out. They're really just like clawing still into this game. But Fancy, they have a super solid lead. 2 keeps taken down, and they're also starting to push now the top lane where the last keep remains for Virtus.pro. But if they can take that, that's a completely different question. Andy Landy unstable. They are all going for the defense here with the Phoenix already being put to use. And the Web Weaver is down, but they still lost the wall. Can they maybe lock a hero down? Doesn't look like it, especially with Taronda missing the shot there. Down to the bot lane, a very well pushed lane, at least for now, from the point of view of Virtus.pro. But they need to win a few of these fights right now. And they have also 51 gems, so they can't really get a complete turn in yet. But if they just eliminate 1 or 2 more waves, then they will be easily in a position where they can turn in the gem amount that they need to get the Web Weavers there. Kuni-chan needs to be careful, but he can always jump away with the Druin's Might. We have the camp taken to the right side now. Nice sneak in here by Team Virtus.pro, and they're starting to move in again. Blast Hammer on BKB. It's actually a talent that a lot of the players on Johanna don't really like too much, because the damage is supposed to be quite insignificant, even at the later levels. It doesn't really do a whole lot. There's a few other options that you have, of course, when level 16 comes to play, and especially that Shield Glare is very, very popular right now, because it gives you small healing potion, especially like it's roughly like 200 at this level. Nice, Syndra goes again, silence on Kel'Thas, and he gets more. They kill Zagara though, but Kel'Thas is about to die. No, he gets healed and used Arcane Barrier, and they turn things around. They go straight for Norok and for the second tank for Muradin. Norok is going to die. Can they keep Muradin alive though? Fancy is trying, and it looks like they might be able to. No, Kuni-chan just too good with the positioning here. But Blumby, he jumps away only to die again. And that's exactly the late game that we've been talking about. The early game going as suspected, with a lot of snowballing happening in favor of Fancy, since they were able to get that fast level 10. But right now things are starting to become a bit different, because we see Virtus.pro moving in and taking full use of that damage build. And this is exactly one of the reasons why personally I like this build on Tyrande a lot more than what, for example, Na'Vi uses. It works well for Na'Vi because they play such a great game, especially early on, that they can dominate and then take it from there and always snipe targets. They're extremely good when it comes to team coordination. But this late in the game, Season Marksman is really starting to pay off for Virtus.pro. And it's one of the reasons why they're still able to get all of that damage out and really just like work in such an environment. They have the level 20 now faster, and they took down the first keep now. So Tyrande now into Nexus Frenzy, and that allows her to get even more damage out. Huntress Fury is of course another talent. Like the attack speed is right now insane that she has. So she can really do a whole lot of work in these situations now. Level 20 of course is going to be ready for Fancy in a few as well. But at this point you can really tell that Virtus.pro is not only back to business, they are even a bit in the lead when it comes to experience. They have the Web Weavers coming in again, and they're going to try and use that to drop a second fort. Well, at least keep. It's also true for forts though, they only killed 1 so far. But they are going to try and use that, of course. So coming back to the damage on Tyrande, we have now 41 extra damage here. So that's going to increase over the next couple of minutes even more as they are pushing in the lanes. But it's still a very decent amount. It's not as much as you would expect, as already mentioned before, but that's mostly because in the early game they didn't really get too much out of the talent and couldn't rotate the way that they wanted. But right now it's a different story. We have a double Storm Shield on the side of Team Virtus.pro, and also the Holy Arena, which is extremely important, especially for the damage output, but also now the double Bolt of the Storm plus Hardened Shield for Fancy. And they are trying to use it, but the snipe against Uther, oh god, losing Uther here. Didn't even have time to use his Divine Shield, but he has Redemption, so he's going to be back to business. And with that, he might be able to save Nuroga, even himself here. Divine Shield being used, but Gad is split from the rest of the team. He needs to take a different path. Could have walked in a bit earlier, didn't. Now there's the Holy Ground blocking his escape path, and now Uther is dead. So not only did the Web Weaver wave for Virtus.pro allow them to take down the fort, but it's also going to drop another keep. They don't even care about the keep, they go straight for the core here without a healer for Fancy. They're just moving in. Virtus.pro, they're starting to take the core, they just right click it, and here comes the defense by Fancy. They're trying to take them out, but it's not enough damage. This is going to be a victory for Virtus.pro. Well played, and Fancy is out of the ZOTAC Cup. What a great game. Really cool match that we just saw there. And guys, like, this match was just absolutely incredible from like a tactical point of view. At the beginning, exactly what we've been talking about happened. Alternate Fancy, they are able to get ahead. They're in a great position. They push the opponent back. They take just like structure after structure and are in a position where they can simply use that Zagara and Sylvanas to push everybody in. They even took the keep around 7 minutes into the game. But the problem for them just was that late game. We saw a completely different approach from Virtus.pro than what, for example, Navi does when they're playing a Toronto on this map. They do not go into that normal build, but instead they decide to go for an attack build where Toronto goes into Seasoned Marksman on Searing Arrows on level 4 and then later on level 20 into Nexus Frenzy. So a lot of damage from Toronto in those fights, and that makes her quite viable in the later stages of the game, and that's exactly where Fancy had their problems. Virtus.pro was moving in and slowly and steadily starting to claim victory after victory in the team fights, turned things around, and well, Alternate Fancy just after that keep went down didn't really take it all that serious anymore. Apparently they didn't keep up the pressure, and they just allowed Virtus.pro to just claw their way back into the series, and all of a sudden the Russians turn things around and it's Alternate Fancy on the run. Great game here. Virtus.pro, they take it, they win the match. It was a pretty cool game, not only to just like see how these two compositions can work against each other, but also the way that both of the teams executed it. I hope that you enjoyed the video and also the commentary. Guys, I'm going to see you next time with more Heroes of the Storm. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked the match here. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and see you soon with more Heroes of the Storm.